The first one, we looked into where are the blue growth potentials in each Baltic Sea region member state, and then we looked into where are the potential at the sea basin with a focus on where could more blue growth be generated if member states were to cooperate across the Baltic Sea region, and then looked into how is this already expressed in the Baltic Sea region strategy. It should be understood that this study is undertaken in the context of other ongoing studies on blue growth around the European sea basins, so the methodology we applied is actually aligned with these other studies. And as I can see from this group here, I don't have to go through these 29 maritime economic activities since you're all specialists yourself. So what did we actually look at? We took different perspectives towards the blue growth. So first, what is actually the size of these maritime economic activities aggregated over the sea basin? And here you can see that coastal tourism and fish for human consumption are actually sticking out, but it should be understood that fish for human consumption is actually to 70% fish processing and retail. Then looking into the recent growth since 2008, which sectors have shown actually growth in this difficult time. And here you can clearly see a very different picture that actually offshore wind, cruise tourism and passenger ferry services, but also marine aquaculture are showing growth. So very different sectors, even though sometimes coming, of course, from a low level. Then we looked into, from the past into the future, so which maritime economic activities actually show the most future potential, and this was done by assessing them against 6 blue growth indicators. And here, apart from short sea shipping and coastal tourism, suddenly new sectors are coming up, like York-Tingham marinas and environmental monitoring. And then we looked into which kind of, how often do they appear in the top ranking 6 list, these maritime economic activities, which countries have sort of indicated them most often. And here you can see that again, tourism and shipping are appearing, but also offshore wind, York-Tingham marinas and shipbuilding. A very different picture came up when we actually analyzed the survey we have undertaken among the Baltic Sea region stakeholders, where we asked, what would you actually see? Which kind of maritime economic activity do you think is most important for blue growth? And here you can see that all national contact points pinpointed to blue biotechnology and marine aquaculture. And various the stakeholders, the coordinators, placed offshore wind in the top ranking list. And here you can see the analysis of the inventory we have undertaken among the flagship projects which are currently in the Baltic Sea region strategy. And yet again, another picture appears because the biggest group of projects, maritime projects, are currently in the environmental monitoring and surveillance field. However, in terms of quality of projects, one has to say that here shipbuilding and shipping have actually the projects which are of highest relevance for this maritime economic activity, whereas tourism and offshore wind or ocean energy are clearly, let's say, underrepresented. So let's have a look at these various maritime economic activities in a bit more closer detail. Short sea shipping, it's next door. It's a large sector resuming growth, and mainly due to increasing east-west trade. But also shipbuilding is actually showing potential. And why? Because, in fact, the companies, not only the big shipyards, but also the equipment industry, the supply industry, have already, in the past, undergone a specialization strategy. They are servicing niche markets, which are actually quite well fit, a good match with the challenge, but also the new opportunities, the new demands coming up from the environmental and safety requirements. It's a competitive sector, but actually blue growth could be generated more if there were more cooperation in terms of LNG terminals, joint approaches called compliance checks, coherent safety standards, port procedures. But as it has already been shown, we are quite confident in terms of the Baltic Sea region strategy. It's well represented. There are a set of prominent projects already in place on which one can build on. Next, fish for human consumption, already indicated. Processing is important. Projects so far in the strategy, there are many, but they are more of regulatory character, and they're all relating to fish catch. So perhaps apart from implementation of the common fishery policy, also an area to be addressed is the processing. And here, marine aquaculture and blue biotechnology. We have seen marine aquaculture is a growing sector, very small, but in fact in Denmark really showing big growth, and it's quite similar, almost like the shipbuilding. Here, the companies are reaping the fruit from the innovation strategy they have undertaken in the past due to environmental regulations. And here, okay, a lot to be done still in sort of paving the path for this sector in terms of regulation, licensing, having their voice heard due to maritime spatial planning. Blue biotechnology, I know this will be covered by Asher later on. Sorry, it is not showing a measurable economic size yet, but it was seen as highly promising, especially in Germany, and it's due to the innovation, the availability of skills across the Baltic Sea region, and what is needed is one coherent long-term development strategy in this field. So in terms of the Baltic Sea region strategy, one has to say that actually marine aquaculture, blue biotechnology, they have almost come up due to flagship projects in the Baltic Sea region strategy. So again, we are confident, showing good potential, but in the future, more focus has to be given to business promotion and pilot installations. Offshore wind, well, it has substantial size, but it's in the country triangle of Denmark, Germany, and Sweden. Of course, you know, world leader, skilled workforce, and please, not only related to energy production, but of course also the construction of wind turbines. So in fact, servicing the other offshore wind markets like North Sea, etc. And this is also, you know, relating to the supporting industry, which is not only in this triangle, but in fact, you know, for instance, offshore ships being produced also in Poland. More growth to be generated on the sea basin in terms of smart grid solutions, with offshore wind parks having an opportunity to service more than one market, import and export, and importing and export energy. It is a sector which is highly dependent on national energy policy. Who has read the newspaper today about Germany? So, I mean, here, of course, also a knowledge and technology transfer needed, also in terms of these regulatory mechanisms. In the Baltic Sea region strategy, actually underrepresented. There's no priority area, there's no action. There is one flagship project relating to offshore wind. So, something to be lifted up, because in fact the networks, the projects, etc. are there, but not in the strategy yet. Coastal tourism we will hear later on, but just one word. Yachting and marinas is emerging. And tourism is a very highly fragmented market with micro-sized enterprises, but it is big. They are looking for the same tourists, you know, within the Baltic Sea region. So what can be done? In fact, you know, in terms of sea basin, you know, development of products based on transnationality, interconnectivity, and actually looking for the international tourists. And we have now the new priority area tourism here, so I don't have to say anything about this in the strategy. And last but not least, in terms of maritime monitoring and surveillance, maritime spatial planning, marine knowledge is actually a blue growth maritime economic activity in its own right. It is actually, more data is privately demanded, it is collected more and more and analyzed by the private sector, and there are lots of innovations and technology development also within this sector itself. More focus should be given to economic blue growth data and focus more on information rather than data, and in fact sort of efficiency gains to be achieved from sea basin cooperation by exchanging less but better information. And in terms of the Baltic Sea region strategy, yes, there is a horizontal action spatial planning, there's a high coverage in environmental monitoring, but you know, in terms of facilitators for blue growth, a lot can be done. And I stop here. I have sort of another slide, but
Okay, many thanks, Angela. Stay there. I have just a complimentary question for you. Thanks for keeping your timing. But all this is very interesting. Can you just briefly add something on how blue growth could be strengthened within the given European strategy for the Baltic Sea region?
Yes, in fact, this was my last, now it's sort of, we go through this here now. But in fact, so let's say, just on because I had given, for each maritime economic activity, the specific activities to be taken. But from the survey we have undertaken, there were really 4 key success factors coming out. So we have heard it today already. Political will is really a key. So there has to be more awareness raising. One cannot do too much there. So more, we had identified lots of prominent projects for each maritime economic activity. So work more on success stories, tell them from local scale, regional scale, national scale. So we have to make it more clear, show the blue growth. Then in terms of the strategy itself, actually a lot of stakeholders felt quite comfortable within the strategy. But in fact, blue growth should become a cross-cutting issue, and that blue growth should be aligned in all sub-objectives, targets, actions, more blue growth issues coming in. And that actually also environmental priority areas should be allowed to add this economic dimension, that they could have actions which are, having this environmental economic dimension, and of course vice versa as well, and that there should be more systematic coordination and combination of blue growth actions. Funding, okay, but access and combinations difficult. We have had this already today in the panel, but it was really seen that continuous seed money is necessary, is a key, and that also continuous support in order to allow to tap on other funding sources like just the BSR program. So in order to get the private investment, to get the national funding, and to have combinations of these national funding, private investments, etc. And here really more coordination, more combinations, but also continuous support has to be given. And then last but not least, many said, well, non-financial support is equally important. It is highly important, and that there were a lot suggesting, well, it would be good to install a permanent coordination, a blue growth contact point, whereby these kind of success stories could be promoted, combined projects could be promoted, more awareness raising be done, but especially also this project and program development.